Now we are recording on YouTube as well. We are all over the place. Okay, so live with Angie. She is a Enneagram aficionado / teacher is what we've decided to call her. So tell me about, like, because I am brand new to this. You sent me that book. I took the test. I am a 2, to no one's surprise. I'm the helper 1. I looked at the childhood stuff, people pleaser. Yep, that's me. Also, it talked about, it was 2 with a 3 wing. So host, hostess. I'm fun and lively, but I'm always kind of looking after other people's, emotions and stuff, and I have been like that my whole life. But it was kind of interesting reading through this stuff, because it's like, yeah, like knowing that about yourself, that's important information. So I want to know a little bit more about where this comes from, like who came up with this, like give me the background on what this is.
All right. So I'll give you like a couple bullet points.
Yeah.
The Enneagram has been traced back to 1200 BC. And so it's been used with every single faith tradition. And there's a lot of links to all the different faith traditions in the Middle East. So way back. And then kind of moved all around the world. And there were different people that kind of picked it up. And no one knows who discovered it. It's an ancient wisdom. But what happened, the cool thing that happened in the 1900s is that it was merged with modern psychology.
Okay.
And so when that happened, things just started clicking. And it really became this system that was an ancient wisdom that is transformational, but that also makes sense with our modern psychology mixed in. And in the 70s, the first books were written in English. So that's, if that tells you. So it's not very old in English. However, the last few years, it has become this really popular kind of trendy thing. And that's, I mean, I was hearing about it. What is this? What is this thing, right?
Yeah.
But there's so much more than what we see on Instagram. That's like the first 5%, and there's still like 95 out of 100 that is like the real stuff. And the thing that makes me so sad, and this is partly about my number too, but that I think that most people quit too soon, and so they mistake the beginning for the end, and that's finding their number and seeing all these behaviors that are attached to it, and maybe learning a couple like negative things, and then we walk around and we're like, well, hey, I can't help it. I mean, I'm a perfectionist. You're all messing up my perfect world here in my house, all you messy children. And so I have, I'm really kind of reinforcing these, we can reinforce some of these ideas and kind of some of these stories we tell ourselves, but it's kind of missing the point. That's the very beginning. And then once we know this information, there's stuff we can do with it. So I just always feel so sad when people stop too soon.
So what's the stuff? Like, so you have that information, you take the test, you get your number. What advice do you have for people once they get that information? What do you do with it then?
So I would first say, so for everyone who has already taken a test, don't worry about it. Yeah. I would not recommend people take a test.
Okay.
The reason being is they are up to 70% inaccurate. So think of, you're sitting down, you are being asked questions. A lot of the words we have bias for or against. We have words that have been said in our families, or we have these norms, or there's all these different things. So there's some words that are kind of like patriarchal, right? So that's something that I keep seeing coming up with women, is like they have decided that they are aggressive, and so they must be one of these couple numbers. But really, when it comes down to it, they're not aggressive at all. It may have just been how they were having, or other people maybe have interpreted behavior or things like that. And so we have to kind of get through some of these things. So you sit down, you take a test, you have all this stuff in your brain, and you're usually thinking based on your behavior, like, what do you do? Yeah. But the Enneagram is really about our motivation. So I am a 1 on the Enneagram, and the number I am is called the perfectionist or the reformer. But most of the time it's the perfectionist. There were a lot of questions when I took the test, and I did the $12 paid test, when I took about perfection and things like that. Well, perfection in my mind is a really dirty word. And it's something to me that is, I don't relate to it because it's unattainable. Now, other people don't maybe have a relationship with perfection, but a 1 on the Enneagram, a perfectionist, I see what's wrong when I walk into a room. And so in my mind, perfection is something that could never happen. And I'm always, if I don't get out of this cycle, if I don't learn what to do with this, I will constantly be basically a hamster on a wheel, right? So actually, like when I was taking the test, if I'm a person who sees what's wrong, and so I go to church, and there's like some event at church, and my friend Carrie calls me like her head elf for Christmas things, right? Because she knows that I will see all the things that are happening that are going wrong before she does. She's in charge of this event, and I'm like fixing them before she knows there's a problem. In that situation, that feels like a superpower. Yeah. But when I'm home with 4 kids in quarantine and my entire house is a mess, that does not feel like a superpower. That feels like a curse. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's the thing. We take these tests. It doesn't really work. And then the other thing about why I think that method of figuring out your number is not really effective is because most of what we see there is behaviors associated with each number, but it's the reason behind the behaviors that really matters. Okay. And so it's difficult to measure your motivation when you are probably thinking about your own behavior, right? So there's that. So we have these patterns, and most of them are automatic. And so our Enneagram number is tied to a set of automatic patterns that run on autopilot, that most of them are unknown to us. And so it's really difficult to answer questions about things we don't even realize how they affect us and affect other people. So what I do recommend, though, is starting reading books. The Road Back to You is a really great place to start. The book I gave you, yes, I love that book, The Wisdom of the Enneagram. That's a really good book.
We'll put it in the link.
So there's a lot of great books. There's a lot of great podcasts. I will tell you, my process of finding my number took about 3 to 4 months.
Wow.
And that was and I'm a person who believed I was very self-aware. And I've been in therapy for years and years, every kind of therapy you could think of, right? So I've had a lot of really hard conversations about what I'm doing and things like that. And there was so much I was missing. And it was through what I've learned with the Enneagram that I could finally take that to therapy and make it so much more useful and helpful to me, and really kind of get through, like, for example, I for years I said, why am I so angry? What is it with the anger? And now I get it. And now I know specifically wording to use with the therapist to say, this is what I'm doing. This is why I think I'm doing it. And I need help with this now, where before it was just like, I don't know, I think I'm just angry. Am I just an angry person? Yeah. It's like, now I can say, I see everything wrong in the world. And it's so hard to see all these things and to feel like my body doesn't have enough energy. My kids are slobs. My husband would rather not, and like, I just got all this like overwhelm, and it turns into all this resentment, and it creates all this anger. And so having this different way of kind of understanding, number one, I can obviously be more like honed in therapy and get kind of proper help. But two, I can forgive myself and start to learn how to let some of those things go. So we find our number, we attach to it, we read some things. It's supposed to be uncomfortable. So if you've learned your number, or you think you have, or you tested for something and you don't feel like an icky feeling about it, or you don't feel ashamed, it might not be the right number, or you're just not getting it yet. And so most people don't usually get to that point. And then when you do that,
there were some people in the comments that said like, hey, I found out I'm this number, but that doesn't really, that doesn't resonate with me. And so
it's probably not.
So it's probably not. Okay.
But the other thing is that we aren't always aware. So so what we call this in Enneagram world is non-judgmental self-observation. And we're trying to learn how to watch ourselves or catch ourselves in the act of going about our life, doing these automatic patterns without basically we're doing them without awareness. And so it's really difficult at first. For some people, some numbers it is nearly impossible.
So when you say that you're going about and you don't know that you're actually doing these things, that sounds to me like the subconscious. And so that's where I'm like, well, EFT would fit in with that. I'm like, you're just getting to the roots. You're getting to what events cause this. With this number, with the Enneagram, could specific events in your life cause you to be a certain number, or are you born a number? How does that work?
That's such a good question. So all the experts believe it is hardwired.
Okay.
So you don't change numbers throughout your life. And so a lot of people do say that. I'm pretty sure, thinking of myself as a child, I was this, but then this horrible thing happened and now I'm this. Yeah. It doesn't really work like that. But there's a couple things. Let me grab this Enneagram symbol here so I can show you. So we have these, so here's all the 9 numbers, right? And you see these arrows that are attached?
Yes.
So the 2 arrows that are attached to each number take us to a different perspective that we must have to take care of ourselves.
I was just reading about that. So I'm looking at 2 and it said under stress, I can turn into an 8 is what it said in the book.
So the language has changed a little. Yes, we call them stress and security, but it's not stress like a bad thing.
Okay.
As a 2, you cannot take care of yourself and be a healthy person without the energy and the behaviors of the 8 and the 4. You cannot do it. So being stuck in our number really creates more problems for us. So it's not the same thing that got me into this mess is not going to get me out, right? And so if you're a 2 and if you're people pleasing and you're doing all these things for other people and you're not taking care of yourself, you're not setting boundaries, you don't think your own needs matter, then there's no way you can be healthy.
Right.
And so the cool thing is the Enneagram is very predictive. So we have these, we know, okay, Casey, you have to learn, right? We learn how to access the 8 and the 4 and what that actually looks like and how to do it. And when you do that, you have this freedom so that it's not static. You can kind of move around the circle and go to different places. And then when we do that, we can just really have this, it's a different perspective. It's a freedom that we can't have, but it creates peace. It starts to get us into more of the life that we want. And it's one of the places where the Enneagram is very transformational, not just change. In Enneagram language, Suzanne Stabile says, change is adding to, and transformation is letting something fall away. And so we're trying to let some of these old things fall away. For me, it's letting the idea of perfection. For me, or for you, it could be that you need to meet everyone's needs and that you're the only person that could do them, or whatever it is. That would be something that could be typical for a Q. But most of the time though, but the first thing is, if you're not aware that you believe that you're the only person who can meet my needs or your family's needs or your whatever, and if I don't know that I believe in my subconscious that I am trying to make the world better, and that feels like my responsibility, if we can't get to that root thing, then we really can't do anything with the Enneagram. It's just kind of a cool party game. But when we get there, it is just so expansive. It is absolutely life-changing. And honestly, I love it. So
yeah. So you said, you had mentioned that it took you 3 or 4 months to kind of really nail down your number. And you mentioned some resources, but like, what was happening in that 3 or 4 months? Were you just reading tons of books and listening to podcasts? And
it was gnashing of teeth, crying, being totally ticked off. There was a lot of things. And so I started with, I have my library here. I started with this, which was not a good place to start for me because it's way too technical. But this was one of the first books written in English, and I really like Richard Rohr. And then moved to The Road Back to You, which is a really good primer. It's a really good primer. And Suzanne Stabile, the curriculum that I use in my classes this is hers. And she has a podcast, and then her second book, The Gap Between Us. And so I listen to a lot of them. So I'm a number that leads with doing. And so I'm cleaning my house, I'm folding laundry, I'm painting, I'm doing all these things, and I'm listening to audio. So I do better absorbing information while I'm doing something. And I took a test that said I was a 4. And I was like, okay, I can see this. I feel like I have a lot of feelings and a lot of emotions, and they're in the feeling. They're one of the numbers that leads with feeling, and they have a lot of big emotions. But there was just a few things that just didn't sit right with me, that didn't feel like me. And so I started listening to podcasts, panel podcasts, talking to people, asking friends who knew the Enneagram, who knew me well, what they thought. And it for me, it ended up being talking about it with other people. And that is, I think, one of the biggest takeaways, which is why I wanted to start teaching it in group. And a lot of people have asked me for one-on-one stuff, and I like talk with friends and whatever, but I haven't done any one-on-one because I think that the group dynamic is so incredible, and that we meet each other and we learn from each other. And so it was talking about this with some friends, and a friend finally put it all together. He said, go through every number with me. I'm at dinner with my husband and some friends. He's like, okay, go through every number. He's a 3. He's like, we'll figure this out. Go through, start with every single one. Tell me why you are this number, or why you're not, or whatever. And we got done. And I'm like, so now Nathan, tell me, what do you think? And he's like, oh my gosh, this is the most one thing I've ever seen in my life. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, you see how you are trying to find the perfect fit? You are trying to make sure that you do it completely right. And you are like so fixated on it that you can't even see how one this whole thing is. And I was very ashamed. I was very embarrassed because I'm like, oh my gosh. And then I started having flashbacks to my mom calling me a perfectionist, and people in my family, but not as I was a kid, because I was always, it wasn't, and that's not against them. It's because of what I was trying to do. And if I couldn't do it right, if I couldn't make it what I wanted to be, then I just quit. And they would try to talk to me, my family, about it didn't have to be perfect. I don't have to do it that way. But that's something I'm still learning, is that it's okay.
And you
to not have it.
With the work that we do with EFT, it's, you can tell me all the things and we can talk about it, but if those programs are running, those programs are what are controlling 95% of your thoughts. You can't talk to me logically about those things. You can't tell me, don't be a perfectionist, don't be, because that's already hardwired within me. And so there's got to be some type of vehicle for change, right? And so
Yeah,
developing
yeah.
that toolbox to kind of work your way through that sounds like it might be really beneficial while you're diving into this stuff.
It really is. I think I tell everybody who is in my groups that they have to find a therapist or a spiritual director if they don't already have one. Yeah. And I start saying it on week 1. So by week 12, that some people who don't believe it, they might believe it, because I do think it's true. I just think sometimes we have lives or situations or traumas that are above our pay grade, and we just don't have the skills, and we would not hesitate to send our child to speech therapy who can't make a sound, but yet some of us, I think it's probably partially how maybe we grew up or the things we heard, but we just need assistance. We're just not meant to be alone, and we need to have people that help us process through.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, especially with everything that's going on right now.
Yeah.
You know, we need our people, we need that support. And I think as moms, like we are constantly putting ourselves like on the back burner, and like exactly what you said, like if our kid is struggling, we're like looking, you know, we're on Google, we're on the phone, like how can I help my kid? But when we're struggling, we're just like, oh, I can just get through it. You know, I can survive my way through. And it's just not, you can only be in that state for so long. And at some point, like you've got to reach out for help. And it's helpful. It's helpful. You don't have to like, you know, survive your way through. And so I agree with you. It's important to have that person. I have my person. I think everyone should have someone to kind of check in with, and girlfriends are great. But it's really nice to just be able to like dump and not feel bad about it. You know, I'm paying you money. I'm just going to dump. Like no judgment, no guilt. You know, it's different than talking to your friend.
It's okay to hire a friend. It's totally okay to pay someone to be your friend, you know?
Yeah. And I love my clients. I love them. I won't work with anyone that I don't love. Like, but it's just a different relationship, you know? And I think that everyone, especially right now, could really benefit from that. So 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
Tell me about too, just how tapping might play a role with this experience with.
Well, I want to do some serious research, like I told you in my email, about how specifically, because we break the Enneagram up into 3 numbers that lead with thinking, right? So their first automatic response to everything is thinking, and then they're going to either do something or feel something with that information. 3 numbers that lead with doing. And I'm one of those numbers, and I'm going to back that up. I'm going to check in with how I feel to see if I should continue doing or not, right? Or thinking. And then the other is feeling, and then you're backing that up with doing or thinking. And I think that there is probably a very specific way that each group could use tapping in a little bit different way. But what I really love about tapping is that it's faster than regular old talk therapy. And there are a couple numbers, and so I don't want to call anybody out, but there are a few Enneagram numbers who, just from my observation of, so this year I have had 80 people start and finish my classes.
Wow.
And so, which is so awesome. Like
that is awesome. Congratulations.
I'm a number that, so I'm a 1, perfection, right? I'm really hard on myself. I'm really self-critical. And my therapist said, I want you to go back and I want you to count how many people have done this, and then they all sent you, they also filled out a Google survey, and read the nice things that they said. And then so I did that, and I thought, wow, that's like really cool, right? There's 80 people. So there's 80 people, but there's a couple numbers that are more hesitant and don't really feel like they need to reach out to people, or that they need other people the same way, or that their feelings have, we say they undervalue their feelings. And so those numbers, I would say just historically over this, let's say 1 year period of 80, are usually the same 3 numbers. And what I've been telling them is you find a form of therapy like tapping where it's faster anyways, and then you hone in, you have all these words. You know that depending on your number, like for example, if you're an 8, 8s are natural leaders, they are strong, they are independent, and the inner struggle for the 8 centers around vulnerability and betrayal. And if you don't have to, I think sometimes we think I have to spend 5 years laying on a couch, right?
Yes.
And when you
or opening up the Pandora's box, like I think
Yeah.
that's why a lot of people are researching, like, oh my gosh, if I go to therapy or if I talk to someone, it's gonna like open up and I'm not gonna be able to close it and things are gonna pop out of here.
Yeah.
Like it's so gentle.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And so, and you have this language, and you have these words, and I say, you can take your workbook. You can take these exact words from me that I sent you in this email and take them to someone, and you can focus in on these things, and it's not a lifetime. It's just it's a short season.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just really think that.
And with that, the people that might be resistant to kind of being vulnerable with someone, the beauty of EFT is it's also a self-help tool. So there's been a lot of stuff where I'm like, I can work through this on my own, and utilizing that tool. If you have this tool in your toolbox, you can use it on stuff and you don't have to constantly be meeting with someone else. So I always save the big stuff for, my practitioner or therapist, whoever I'm choosing to work with at that time. But the day-to-day stuff, like I can figure that a lot of it on my own, having this tool and mastering this tool. And you said you've used it with your children as well, right?
Yes. Yeah. I have a daughter who has special needs. She has a lot of medical problems. And her main diagnosis anymore is PTSD because of all these surgeries and things, right? And so she has a really hard time at school. She, on top of ADHD, the anxiety, and pre-COVID, she was leaving at least 2 classes per day to go to the nurse's office to work, to calm down, she would say. And she would go walk in the halls, and she'd go sit there and she'd talk to the nurse or talk to someone for a little while, and then she'd go back to class. But she was missing so much class, and she hardly does any work anyways. I mean, that's the honest truth. Like she really struggles in school, and then all these hours she's missing. And so after I met with you so it was around this time last year that I did a tapping session with you. And so I said, Ella, what if we try some of this stuff? So I taught her about what you taught me. And then what she started doing was, instead of going to the nurse's office, which could take an hour each time she went, right? And she has to have a helper. I mean, it's like this whole thing. She was going in the hallway and asking if she could have 5 minutes. And then she's breathing and doing tapping on herself privately in the hallway, and then coming back to class. And the amount
amazing.
Isn't that cool?
That's awesome.
She gained so much time. That's one thing, but she just felt more in control of herself. Like she could do something to help when she was having those big anxious emotions. Yeah. Instead of before she was just running away.
Yes. Yeah. So that's the beauty, is giving them that's what I loved about EFT. I'm like, this is finally something I can do. Give me something I can do all the time. I can't do a downward dog in the middle of the grocery store. I can't do that. That relaxes me, but I can't do that all the time. This is something I can take with me everywhere. And that's the beauty of it. I remember I was working at the high school, and they gave me every emotional kid that pretty much walked through the door. And I was sitting in my office, and there was a therapist had a student for an hour and a half in there. I think they had, had paid for that session. Well, she came out and she went into the calm room, and she was still upset. And I'm like, girl, this has been an hour and a half. Come here. So she came in my room, and literally after 2 rounds, she's like, oh, I feel better. So she just spent 2 hours. Oh my gosh. And every school counselor should have this tool, because it really does speed things up. But, yeah. So thank you for sharing that story. That's awesome. Anything else you want to include? Tell me about the classes that you're doing. Yeah. People want information about that.
I'll link in the chat, the group info. But so what I believe that learning the Enneagram in a group setting with mostly with people that are probably not just like you, and probably you wouldn't have chosen even, right? I mean, we have to have these different perspectives, because if you think of it, right, we're saying that the Enneagram means that there's 9 ways to see the world.
Yeah.
Right? There's 9 ways to feel the world and think about the world and experience it. And you only have one. Yeah. And so when you learn the Enneagram in the group, you are able to, what I tell everyone is, my hope is that you walk away from this and you're so much more kind and compassionate, because before you believed the way that you saw the world was the way. Right. And now you know I'm missing 8/9 of what's happening. Let's say that I'm missing 8/9. It's like most of the pie, right? I'm missing it. And so you just become more kind and forgiving and open. And someone says, this is my experience, and that hasn't been your experience. And you can take that with some grace and go, maybe that is your experience. Maybe I want to learn more about that. That's really interesting to me. Or I'm sorry that you've gone through that, you know? Mm-hmm. So that's really what my hope is. So the groups are limited to 12 people, and they are 12 weeks, and it goes by very, very fast. I told you I have those surveys where people after class, and I can't tell you how many people said that this saved them in COVID, which made me feel so wonderful. Like, just to think, and not because of me, but because that they had a place that they could look forward to coming. And we do that. So I use the videos that Suzanne Stabile, who wrote these books, her video series, which is really, really good. But what I have done this time is that I have been working nonstop. My shoulders hurt. I'm like crunched, because I have been creating my own curriculum, and which has been like crazy. So here's my chapter 1 right here, which is so great. Right. And all the things that I've been supplementing with, and that I come when we do these groups on Zoom and I bring this other information, I have just basically made it into my own thing. And so I have 3 classes starting in January. 2 of them are full. And I have 9 spots in Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern time. And it is all women so far in this group. And I'm keeping it only women. And I think it will be an intentional break for me learning. I will intend each week to leave my children. Goodbye, children upstairs. Figure it out. Just do your work quietly.
Just fine. Yes.
Yes. And then I will come, and it's like the way I'm going to take care of myself. Yeah. So I know we're worn out, and I know sometimes we feel like we're drowning, but I am telling you, starting the year, adding this tool to your toolbox is very beneficial. So I'll add that stuff, the information there. And then I am on Facebook. I think you can type in Enneagram Angie, or you can type in the Enneagram Journey with Angie Liskey. But I think if you type in Enneagram Angie, it actually comes up.
Okay.
So
and with the classes, is that you talking then? Like with that 10 a.m.?
So during the week before, everyone will watch a video that's on Vimeo, and the videos are so good. They're fantastic. And then each week they'll have the curriculum, and so supplemental things that I think you need to know. For example, there's some words that are really triggering to people, and so I'm addressing that stuff and kind of talking through that. I've spent a lot of time talking about this non-judgmental self-observation, this whole awareness thing, and kind of how to like watch ourselves as an outsider, catching ourselves in the act. So a lot of stuff in there. And then, so they'll have the video, they'll have that, and then we'll get together on Zoom, and then we're going to talk about it. We're going to ask questions. Each week we're going to have breakout groups, which everyone tells me is their favorite part, which I love. So that's where people really kind of get to know each other. And usually people they don't really have a lot in common with, you think at first, and then it really works out. Another thing that I'm doing, because I think it's so incredibly important, is each week we're going to do something called the Enneagram in context. So like I told you, the Enneagram numbers are hardwired. However, your experiences, your trauma, your education. Did you have access to medical care and quality education when you were a child or an adult? Or do you have, all these different things, your race, all these things affect who you are, right, in your number. And so I want to know, maybe I'm a 2 and you're a 2, but I want to know about what things made you a 2, right? And so, and how, or what things have affected the way you look at the 2. Yeah. And if your family required this or whatever. And so it doesn't mean everyone's coming and sharing all of their deepest, darkest secrets, although you're allowed to. But we kind of run it like a, what happens in group stays in group.
Support groupie.
And yes, yeah. And so we kind of talk through some of these things. And some people never share, and some people share a lot, but usually by the end, the people that don't really share do share some. Yeah. And it's kind of the hope to learn from each other, because I'm right now, I've said, I think 4 months in group therapy. It is the best thing ever. I mean, I've been leading groups, but now being a participant in a group, and it's a therapist who's our leader, it is so beneficial. And even some of my group mates, they'll tell a story that is nothing like my experience, and something that has been broken or been confusing to me, it all of a sudden, listening to them speak about their own lives, it connects it for me, and I can go, oh my gosh, I didn't see it. But hearing someone else say these words about their experience, it is so valuable. Mm-hmm. And so that is what I am. That is, I guess my husband said the other day, I feel like you created the group that you've always needed. Yeah. And I do think that's true, is that I need people, and I know that my tendency is to do everything by myself. Mm-hmm. That is natural in me, but I can't do that. I can't live like that. And that doesn't make me happy. It makes me really lonely and depressed. And I don't want to be like that. It makes me overwhelmed. I don't want to be like that. I want to be free from some of those things. Mm-hmm. And so that's my hope. That's my hope, how it turns out. But the feedback is good. I'll say that.
Sounds like it. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, and also leading, taking a leadership role on this and helping moms. And I mean, like we were talking about before, like, I feel like we all need to be all hands on deck right now. Mm-hmm. So if you have a superpower, if you have a way that can help others right now, we've got to be kind of stepping up and utilizing that and putting these tools in lots of moms' toolboxes, just loading them up. And that was why I shifted this group to, like, not just me, like, let's open this up and like have mm-hmm. everyone kind of share their wisdom, because we all have different superpowers, right?
Yeah. Yes, you're right.
Thanks for showing up for others. Thanks for showing up tonight. We'll get your information linked in the comments. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to post them below. It looks like there were a couple comments here. The Road Back to You is an excellent read, Carla said. Some people are sharing their numbers on here. So feel free to reach out to Angie with any questions. And I hope everyone has a really happy holiday and a happy new year. And God help us all right now, right? All the things.
Can we make it to spring? If we can make it to spring, I feel like maybe we can make it. Oh.
All right. Well, thank you, Casey. Everyone have a good night. Bye.